My name is Andrew, and for the past 20 years I've lived a life that from the outside seemed perfect. My wife Emily and I built our life together in a quaint suburban town. Our home, a charming two-story house with a white picket fence, was the epitome of the American dream. We had two children, Jacob, a spirited teenager of 16, and Lily, a bright and inquisitive 12-year-old. Our neighborhood was the kind where everyone knew each other, where weekends were filled with barbecues and soccer games. I worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm, a job that provided a stable income but also demanded long hours, especially during tax season. Emily, on the other hand, had started her own small business, a bakery that quickly became the heart of our community. Her pastries were the talk of the town, and her warm, welcoming nature made her beloved by all. Our marriage, from my perspective, was built on a solid foundation of trust and mutual respect. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always managed to navigate through them together. At least that's what I believed. Little did I know the cracks in our seemingly perfect life were much deeper than I'd ever imagined. It all started subtly, almost imperceptibly, with Emily's behavior changing in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on. At first, it was the small things. She became more secretive with her phone, often taking calls in another room or texting late into the night. She used to leave her phone lying around, but now it was always in her pocket or turned face down on the counter. Her excuses for being late from the bakery grew more frequent. "A huge order came in last minute," she'd say, or "I had to stay late to prepare for an early morning delivery." At first, I didn't think much of it. Emily was dedicated to her business, and I knew how demanding running a bakery could be. But then, there were the nights out. Emily had never been much of a night owl, preferring to unwind at home with a glass of wine and a good book. Now, she was frequently out late, attending networking events or meeting up with old friends. When I asked about these outings, she was vague, her explanations just plausible enough to be believable but not detailed enough to dispel my growing unease. One evening she came home later than usual, her cheeks flushed and her hair slightly disheveled. When I asked where she'd been, she hesitated before saying, "Just out with some friends from the bakery. You know how it is, catching up and all." "You don't smell like you've been at a bakery," I remarked, trying to keep my tone light. She laughed it off. "Oh, Andrew, you worry too much. We went to a new bar downtown after work. I promise, it's nothing." Her reassurances did little to calm the storm brewing inside me. The following days were filled with more of the same: late nights, guarded phone conversations, and an ever-present tension that seemed to cling to her like a shadow. My suspicions grew when I noticed changes in her appearance. Emily had always been beautiful, but now she seemed to be putting in extra effort. Her wardrobe began to fill with new clothes, more revealing than what she usually wore. She started wearing makeup more frequently, and even got a new haircut. When I commented on how stunning she looked, she shrugged it off, saying, "Just wanted a change." I tried to push my doubts aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. But the more I observed, the harder it became to ignore the signs. The intimacy between us dwindled. Our conversations became stilted, filled with awkward silences where there used to be easy banter. The spark that once ignited our connection felt like it was fading, replaced by a chasm of unanswered questions and unspoken fears. One night, unable to sleep, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the past few months in my mind. The pieces didn't fit. Emily's behavior, her sudden changes, it all pointed to something I couldn't bear to acknowledge. But I knew I had to face it. Ignoring the problem wouldn't make it go away. Driven by a need to uncover the truth, I started paying closer attention. I checked our phone bill and noticed an unfamiliar number that appeared frequently, often late at night. I jotted it down, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Who was she talking to? Why so late? Then there were her absences. She started attending weekend conferences for her business, something she'd never done before. Each time she left, she returned more distant, her explanations less convincing. The final straw came when I found a receipt for a hotel room tucked away in her purse. It was for a weekend she'd claimed to be at a baking expo. My hands trembled as I held the receipt, my worst fears seemingly confirmed. The world I thought I knew was unraveling, and I was left grasping for the truth amid a sea of lies and deceit. My suspicions gnawed at me, an incessant whisper that refused to be silenced. I needed proof. Something undeniable that would confront Emily with the reality of her actions. One Saturday, when she was supposedly at another business conference, I decided to follow her. She left the house in a rush, a suitcase in hand, her demeanor unusually cheerful. I waited for a few minutes before getting into my car and trailing her. My heart pounded in my chest as I kept a safe distance, my mind racing with scenarios of what I might find. Emily drove to a nearby hotel, the same one from the receipt I had found. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I watched her park and walk inside. A few moments later, a man approached her. They embraced, their familiarity and intimacy clear even from a distance. My stomach churned as I recognized him. James, an old friend of hers from college. I parked my car and with trembling steps made my way into the hotel. I felt like an intruder in my own life, each step taking me further into a reality I didn't want to face. At the front desk, I asked for a room key under the pretense of being Emily's husband, who had forgotten his. My heart sank when the receptionist handed me the key without hesitation. I took the elevator to the third floor, the journey feeling like an eternity. As I approached the room, I could hear faint voices inside, laughter mingled with muffled conversation. I hesitated, my hand poised to knock, but then I decided against it. Instead, I slid the keycard into the door, the click of the lock echoing ominously in the quiet hallway. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart racing. The scene before me was both surreal and devastating. Emily and James were on the bed, tangled in each other's arms, their clothes strewn across the room. The intimacy of their actions, the way they touched each other, was a brutal confirmation of my worst fears. "Emily," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. She gasped and scrambled to cover herself, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Andrew, what are you doing here?" James, equally flustered, hastily gathered his clothes and mumbled an apology before bolting from the room. I barely noticed him leave, my focus entirely on Emily. "How long?" I demanded, my voice cold and hard. "How long have you been lying to me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to find her words. "Andrew, I can explain." "Explain? Explain what?" I shouted, the anger I had been holding back erupting. "Explain how you've been sneaking around behind my back? How you've been destroying our family?" Her tears flowed freely now, but I felt no sympathy. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she sobbed. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why, Emily? We had a life together, a family. Was all of that meaningless to you?" She shook her head, her sobs growing louder. "I felt lonely, Andrew. You were always working, always busy. I needed someone to talk to, someone who made me feel wanted." "Bullshit," I spat. "You think I wasn't lonely? You think I wasn't working hard for us, for our kids? This isn't about loneliness, Emily. This is about you being selfish." She tried to reach out to me, but I stepped back, recoiling from her touch. "Don't," I warned. "Don't you dare try to make this my fault." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sorry isn't enough," I replied, my tone cold and final. "You've broken everything. You've shattered our lives, our trust. There's no going back from this." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing on the bed. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I exited the hotel, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. My marriage was over, and the life I thought I knew was gone. The only thing left was to confront the painful reality and decide what came next. The drive home was a blur. The anger and betrayal coursed through my veins, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. Our house, the place that had once been a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I knew I had to confront Emily, to lay everything out in the open, no matter how painful it would be. I found her in the living room, pacing anxiously. Her eyes were red from crying, but I felt no pity. The sight of her only reignited my anger. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and resolute. She nodded, looking down at her feet. "Andrew, please let me explain." I cut her off. "Explain what, Emily? That you've been cheating on me with James? That you've been lying to me, to our children, for who knows how long?" She winced at my words, but I pressed on, not letting her off the hook. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Almost a year." The admission hit me like a physical blow. A year of deceit, a year of betrayal. Why Emily? Why him? She took a deep breath, tears streaming down her face. I felt neglected, Andrew. You were always at work, always busy. James was there for me. He listened. He made me feel wanted. I shook my head in disbelief. So because you felt neglected, you decided to destroy our marriage? Our family? I never meant for it to go this far, she cried. It started as just talking, but then it became more. I didn't know how to stop. You didn't know how to stop? I repeated incredulously. You didn't want to stop. You chose this, Emily. You chose to betray me, to betray our children. Her sobs grew louder, but I felt no sympathy. I made mistakes, she admitted. But I love you, Andrew. I never stopped loving you. Love, I scoffed. You don't do this to someone you love. You don't lie, you don't cheat. You don't destroy their life. She reached out trying to touch me, but I pulled away. Please, Andrew. I want to make this right. I'll do anything. Anything? I asked, my voice filled with sarcasm. What can you possibly do to make this right? The trust is gone, Emily. You've destroyed it. We can go to counseling, she pleaded. We can work through this. I'll cut all ties with James. I'll do whatever it takes. I shook my head, the anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. It's too late, Emily. You've done too much damage. Please, she begged, falling to her knees. Don't leave me. Don't leave our family. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything, now a stranger to me. You left our family the moment you chose to be with him. Her cries filled the room, but I felt numb. I knew what I had to do, no matter how painful it was. I'm filing for divorce, I said quietly. I can't stay in a marriage built on lies. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear and desperation. No, please. Think of the kids. Think of our family. I am thinking of them, I replied. They deserve better than this. They deserve honesty, stability, not a sham of a marriage. Her tears continued to flow, but I had made up my mind. I'll be staying with a friend for a while, I said, turning to leave. We'll talk about the details later. As I walked out the door, her cries echoed behind me. I knew this was just the beginning of a long and painful process, but it was a necessary one. For the sake of my own sanity, and for the future of my children, I had to move forward. The confrontation had been brutal, but it was the first step toward reclaiming my life from the wreckage of Emily's betrayal. In the days that followed, the numbness was replaced by a cold, calculated rage. I couldn't shake the image of Emily and James together, their betrayal replaying in my mind like a broken record. Every time I saw her around the house trying to act as if nothing had changed, my anger intensified. I needed an outlet, a way to reclaim some semblance of control over my shattered life. That's when I decided that it wasn't enough to simply leave her. I needed her to feel the same pain, the same humiliation she had inflicted on me. My plan began to take shape during one sleepless night. I knew where James worked. He owned a small marketing firm downtown. Emily had mentioned it casually over the years, never suspecting I would one day use that knowledge against her. I started by gathering information, carefully crafting the details of my revenge. First, I made an anonymous call to the firm's biggest client, insinuating that James was involved in unethical practices. I thought you should know, I said, disguising my voice. There are rumors circulating about Mr. Turner's professional conduct. You might want to look into it. Next, I used social media to my advantage. I created a fake profile and befriended James's wife, Clara. Through this fictitious persona, I planted seeds of doubt, subtly hinting that her husband might not be as faithful as she believed. I saw him with a woman the other day, I messaged her. They seemed quite close. I thought you should know. As my plan progressed, I focused on Emily. I knew that simply divorcing her wasn't enough. She needed to understand the depth of her betrayal, to feel the consequences of her actions. I decided to expose her affair publicly, in a way that would leave no room for denial. I called a neighborhood meeting under the guise of discussing a new community project. It wasn't unusual for me to take such an initiative, and our neighbors were quick to gather at our house. I had prepared meticulously, ensuring that everything was in place. As people settled in, I took a deep breath and began. Thank you all for coming, I started, my voice steady. Before we discuss the project, there's something personal I need to address. I've recently discovered that my wife, Emily, has been unfaithful. She has been having an affair with James Turner. Gasps filled the room, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Emily, who was sitting beside me, turned pale, her eyes pleading with me to stop. But I continued, fueled by the righteous anger burning within me. I've been struggling with this betrayal, trying to understand why someone I trusted so completely would do this, I said, my voice cracking slightly. I thought it was important for all of you to know the truth. Emily burst into tears, but I felt no sympathy. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. Our neighbors, initially stunned, began to murmur amongst themselves. The sense of betrayal was palpable, not just from me, but from the community that had held us in such high regard. James's wife, Clara, was present at the meeting. Her face contorted in pain as the realization hit her. She stood up abruptly, tears streaming down her face, and stormed out of the house. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by Emily's sobs. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. Word spread quickly, and soon everyone knew about the affair. James's business suffered, clients pulling out one by one. Clara filed for divorce, citing infidelity and emotional distress. Emily, once the beloved baker of our community, found herself shunned and ostracized. As for me, I felt a grim satisfaction. My revenge had been swift and thorough, but it didn't bring the closure I had hoped for. The pain was still there, a constant reminder of the life I had lost. But at least I had taken a stand, refusing to be a victim any longer. In the weeks that followed, I moved out of our house and into a small apartment. I filed for divorce, determined to rebuild my life on my own terms. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but I knew that I had taken the first step toward healing. Emily reached out to me several times, begging for forgiveness, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The damage was done and there was no going back. My focus now was on my children, ensuring they felt loved and supported despite the chaos around them. My revenge had been a turning point, a declaration that I would no longer tolerate deceit and betrayal. It was a harsh lesson for all involved, but one that needed to be learned. As I navigated the complexities of my new life, I held on to the hope that, in time, the pain would fade, and I would find peace once more. Emily's numerous attempts to contact me eventually culminated in a desperate plea for a face-to-face meeting. Part of me didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear more excuses or justifications, but I knew for the sake of closure, for the finality of it all, I needed to face her one last time. We agreed to meet at a small park not far from our old house, a place that once held happy memories for us. I arrived early, finding a secluded bench where we wouldn't be disturbed. Emily arrived soon after, looking haggard and defeated, a shadow of the vibrant woman I once knew. "Andrew," she started, her voice trembling. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Say what you need to say, Emily." She took a deep breath, tears already pooling in her eyes. "I don't know where to begin. I know I've hurt you beyond words, and I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Then why did it?" I asked, my tone harsher than I intended. "Why, Emily? You had a choice, and you chose to betray me." She wiped her tears, struggling to compose herself. "I was lonely, Andrew. You were always working, and I felt so neglected. James was there, and it just happened." "It didn't just happen," I snapped. "You made it happen. You let it happen." She nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I know. I'm not trying to make excuses. I know I was wrong. I've destroyed our family, and I can't take that back." There was a long silence as I grappled with my emotions. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to end this chapter with some semblance of peace. But another part of me couldn't forget the pain she had caused. "What do you want from me, Emily?" I finally asked. "I want to try and fix things," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's a long shot, but I want to go to counseling, to do whatever it takes to make things right." I shook my head slowly. "I can't do that. I can't pretend like everything can go back to how it was. Too much has happened. Too much trust has been broken." She looked down, her tears falling freely now. "I understand, but please, For the sake of the kids, can we at least try to be civil? I'm not here to punish you, Emily, I said, my tone softening slightly. I'm here to find a way to move forward. For the kids, yes, we need to be civil, but that's as far as it goes. She nodded, her face a mask of despair. I'm so sorry, Andrew. I wish I could undo it all. I know, I replied, standing up. But we have to live with the choices we've made. As I walked away, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. The conversation had been necessary, a painful but crucial step towards closure. I had said what needed to be said, and now it was time to focus on the future. When I got home, I found an email from my lawyer with the finalized divorce papers attached. I felt a pang of sadness as I signed them, the official end to 20 years of marriage. But there was also a sense of liberation, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I sent the signed papers back, knowing that this was the final step in severing the ties that had bound me to Emily. It was over. Truly over. The following days were a blur of legal meetings and arrangements for the kids. Emily and I agreed on joint custody, ensuring that Jacob and Lily would have stability and love from both of us. It wasn't the family life I had envisioned, but it was the best we could do given the circumstances. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat down with a glass of whiskey, reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the revenge, the confrontation. It all seemed like a twisted dream. But it was real, and I had to accept it. As I took a sip, I thought about the future. The pain of Emily's betrayal would take time to heal, but I was determined to rebuild my life, to find happiness again, for myself and for my children. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was free to chart my own course, unburdened by deceit and lies. It was a new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it. The divorce had been finalized for a few months, and life was gradually starting to find its new rhythm. Moving into my apartment had been an adjustment, but it also provided a fresh start, a blank canvas to rebuild my life. I filled it with things that brought me peace. Photographs of Jacob and Lily, artwork I'd always admired but never bought, and a collection of books I'd been meaning to read for years. My relationship with the kids had grown stronger. Without the constant tension of a broken marriage hanging over us, we found joy in simple activities. We cooked together, played board games, and went on weekend hikes. Their laughter became my solace, their smiles a reminder that life could still be beautiful despite the pain we had endured. Jacob had taken the divorce hard initially, but as time passed, he began to open up more. We had long, heartfelt conversations about trust, love, and resilience. I wanted him to understand that while people can make mistakes, it doesn't define their entire existence. Lily, with her bright curiosity, asked endless questions, each one an opportunity for me to teach her about strength and forgiveness. Emily and I maintained a cordial relationship for the sake of the children. There were moments of awkwardness, but we managed to navigate them with a shared understanding of our responsibilities as parents. She had moved into a small house nearby, making it easier for the kids to transition between our homes. Despite everything, I could see she was trying to be a better mother, and for that, I was grateful. Professionally, I decided to take a leap of faith and started my own accounting firm. It was a risky move, but it felt right. The work kept me busy and allowed me to channel my energy into something productive. Slowly but surely, the business grew, and with it, my confidence. I was no longer defined by the past, but by the choices I was making in the present. Socially, I reconnected with old friends and made an effort to expand my circle. I joined a local running club, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. The physical exertion was a great stress reliever, and the camaraderie of the group reminded me that I wasn't alone in my journey. One evening, at a neighborhood gathering, I met Sophie. She was a single mother of two, recently moved to the area. There was an instant connection, a shared understanding of the challenges we both faced. We started meeting for coffee, our conversations ranging from parenting to personal dreams. She had a warmth about her, a kindness that was refreshing. As our friendship deepened, I found myself looking forward to our time together. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people enjoying each other's company. It was a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil I had endured, and it felt like a balm to my wounded heart. One afternoon, as we walked through the park, Sophie turned to me and said, "Andrew, you're stronger than you know. You've been through so much, but you still have so much love to give." Her words resonated deeply. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, understood. "Thank you, Sophie," I replied, taking her hand. "You've helped me see that there's still hope, still a future worth fighting for." Life wasn't perfect, but it was moving forward. I had learned to embrace the uncertainty, to find joy in the present moment. The past was a chapter closed, a series of lessons that had shaped me but did not define me. As I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of peace. I was surrounded by people who cared for me, who believed in my ability to rebuild. The pain of Emily's betrayal had faded, replaced by a quiet strength and a renewed sense of purpose. In the end, I realized that life is a series of beginnings and endings, each one a chance to grow and redefine ourselves. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the resilience and the courage to face it head on. With Jacob and Lily by my side, and the possibility of new love on the horizon, I was no longer a man defined by betrayal, but by the strength of my recovery and the promise of a brighter future.